Today is Saturday, October 29th, 2022. I'm here with Mom and Dad Esplin, and they are just so excited to be doing another one of these interviews. And I thought what we would do is I've got some questions from some of the kids, some of the siblings, and also some of the grandkids that had questions. And they wanted to hear about your courtship. And they said, especially from Dad's perspective, you're dating and you're courting. So, Dad, what do you want to say? And then we'll give Mom the opportunity to rebut it. And
well, they want to know about my courting. I mean, what we do?
Well, when did you first meet Mom? How did you first meet her?
I met her in a boys' dorm, right?
That's right.
How did Mom end up in a boys' dorm?
That is very long. Let her answer that one.
I'm going to just fix your microphone for just a second here. So, Mom, you ended up in a boys' dorm.
In Cedar City, Utah, when I was going to college in Cedar City, Utah. In 1959.
Mm-hmm. And, Mom, how did you end up in a boys' dorm?
Well, I had made friends with Roe's cousin. I didn't know Lorna was Roe's cousin, but Lorna Sorensen said to me and to my girlfriend, after mutual one night, they had mutual at college, she said, do you want to come down with me? I've got to go see my sister, and I'm going to go ask Roe if he'd give us a ride. And I thought, okay, sure. So we went up with her, and Roe was at the boys' dorm where he lived with his roommates. So we went over, and that's where she introduced us.
And so
now, this cousin, mine, is her parents lived in Elko, Nevada. Mm-hmm. And they had sheep and cattle in Elko, Nevada, and they were both coming to school. Was the sister teaching school, or was she in school?
She had already graduated, and she
okay.
had
Her
a
name,
house there.
Lorna, was the one you come with, and Corrine was the other sister from Nevada that was in down in Cedar City.
And was it love at first sight, or what was the relationship? How did the relationship develop, Dad?
The relationship, how did it develop? Oh, that's very interesting. Oh, I did take them to where they wanted to go. What happened after that? How did we get together again?
So at first, you were just a ride. You were somebody to drive them around.
Yes. And I had a nice car. Oh, they liked my car.
What kind of car did you have?
Chevrolet, wasn't it? Was it the Chevrolet I had?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the turquoise one?
Yes, the turquoise, two-door Del Rey Chevrolet, beautiful turquoise. 55, I think, 57. Anyway, she fell in love with my car, I think.
It was a pretty car.
It was a turquoise car, a beautiful car.
That's the car you sold to get your family to Germany, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when did it become just more than a car ride? When did you decide you wanted to go out with her, or it was extra special?
Well, she ended up coming to Orderville. Which cousin was Orderville? Yeah, she had a car. The girl from Nevada had a car.
She borrowed her sister's car.
And she came to Orderville for a dance.
Junior prom.
Oh, you have a junior prom in Orderville. All your family come, I mean your mothers, grandmothers come to just watch people dance. They don't dance necessarily, but there's a lot of family members come to a high school junior prom because they like beautiful decorations. Mm-hmm. And they come to see some of the family members be there. They were just curious. In Orderville, what else was they to do? Go to a movie, go to a ball game, and go to a dance. That's about all there was to do.
Did you take Linda to the dance, or?
Yeah, well.
Well, was she your date, or did you just?
What was you? Were you just a spectator?
If I remember correctly, this is a long time ago, but Lorna said, I know Roe wants to go with you to the dance, so please come with me. And Roe was underneath the car fixing something when we got to his home. And so I kind of invited myself to go with him to the dance. And not only was that where I met his two grandmothers, but I met young married couples with their little babies. They brought their little babies to the dance too. It wasn't just they couldn't leave him home alone, so they'd bring him to the dance. So it was a whole town of people.
A dance in southern Utah, come to a dance at a high school was just very special. Because they could see how the high school kids, the juniors, had decorated the gym, which was pretty special. Those dances were. It was a spectacle to see what they'd done. They put quite a bit of money into those dances to make them beautiful.
Did your relationship, did it evenly progress, or did one of you push it a little faster than the other? Did one of you lead the relationship faster than the other, or did it just naturally? When did the magic start to happen, when you started to realize that the other person was maybe a little extra special to you?
Well, it was extra special, I guess, because when I went to Cedar City to go to college, my girlfriend back in Valley School, high school, decided she didn't need me anymore, I guess, so I was actually looking for somebody else.
So you were brokenhearted.
I was brokenhearted, yes, because she found other dates now that I was gone from high school.
What a rebound, Mom. What a rebound.
Reef.
Mom, what's your recollection? When did it start to appear to be a special experience for you?
When he took myself and my girlfriend that lived in Bountiful back home after school was out at the end of the year.
Yeah,
and so
right.
he offered us to take us home, which was quite a long drive. And then I got a little bit better acquainted with him as an individual when he was in my home and meeting my people.
So he took you and the girl home to Bountiful, and then did he spend time with your family?
Yeah, he stayed about a week, and so we got pretty well acquainted there. And that's kind of how our early courting was, because we lived so far apart. It was a 7-hour drive in those days, and so we lived far apart, and then we'd send letters. And I let him know in my letter that I was going to go to Utah State next year when school started up, because I got so terribly homesick down in southern Utah. It was a tough year for me down there. And so he decided he was going to go to Utah State. And then he would come Saturday night, and we'd go out to a movie, and then pretty soon he was coming Saturday morning, and then pretty soon he was coming Friday night and staying until Sunday afternoon. And
all the way from Utah State to Bountiful.
Centerville. Yeah.
So up in Logan? And so, Dad, you were in school at that time.
Yes.
And then when did you guys decide you wanted to take that relationship further, or you wanted to get married?
Oh, boy. Hey, what about the horse riding with Des Moines Sorensen? When did that happen?
That was the first date. We did things, 3 things. We went horseback riding 3 times. We went to 3 different movies while we were still in Cedar City. The college in Cedar City was a branch of Utah State.
Right.
So our credits could just move right over and be part of Utah State's credits. So it was working toward a degree. But yeah, we had a wonderful horseback ride and I always grew up with horses, and so that was quite an attraction for me, that here was a young man that liked horses too. And so we found common things that we enjoyed doing together. We played ping pong 3 times in the bottom of the seminary building on college campus, and everything we did kind of went in 3s.
So your dates were ping pong, riding horses, seeing movies,
hiking. Yeah.
I tried to make an impression on her to get that horse go. The guy that loaned us a horse, he was a cousin too. Des Moines Sorensen. He was a cousin, and he had horses, and he was over in Cedar City. So I arranged to have horses. I was going to impress Linda to take her horseback riding. I think it impressed you, didn't it?
It did. It was a good date. It was a lot of fun.
So you met in Cedar City. The relationship developed down in Orderville during junior prom. Then you both went to school in Logan. And would you say a lot of that relationship developed in Logan?
Well, actually, I was there one semester, and it cost me exactly the same amount of money that I spent the whole year down in southern Utah. It was twice as expensive to go to school there, so I dropped out and went to work in Salt Lake. And so, yeah, then I was around him less time. He always found jobs for me to do in Utah State. We did the craziest jobs together you could imagine.
Like what?
Picking up potatoes, dragging a sack between your legs and walking down the fields picking up potatoes that had fallen off.
Things have not changed, Mom.
Oh no, he's found jobs for me for 60 years.
That's great.
And then we cut up the carcass of sheep and weighed it underwater to see and figure out what happened with the sheep and how fast they grew and how much it was. It was quite an interesting job.
When did you decide, Dad, that you wanted to marry her?
When she asked me, I think.
No, I never did ask you, but I knew before you did.
Yeah.
So why did you know before Dad did?
Well, I asked the Lord about things, and I said, after I got through with that one particular prayer in January, I just knew in my heart that I was going to marry Rose someday. And he didn't figure it out until May. So then he proposed in May, and that was 61.
And how did he figure it out?
I don't know. He never did tell me. He just came up and...
I had a ring. That's how I had a ring to give to her, an engagement ring. And I had bought that a few days before I did go up there to see Linda in Bountiful. So I was committed then. If I spent the money for a diamond ring, for an engagement ring, I was committed. That's for sure.
So did, when you decided to get married, did you guys talk about it at all? Getting married?
Oh, yeah. But we had to wait till Perry Mason was over.
Yeah.
When we got there, it was night, and we were watching my mom and I always watched Perry Mason to figure out the whodunit, and poor Roe was a nervous wreck. Finally, when the show ended, we went for a ride, and when we got home, he proposed in the car.
So you were kicking your heels, waiting for Perry Mason? How were you feeling about that?
I was very nervous how I was going to pull this off. Because I had all the dialogue, of course, written down there as how I was going to do this.
Now, did you ask the parents first, or how traditional was this?
Did I?
I don't know if you did.
Did you have to fight? Did you have to fight the brothers off, or how did you propose?
Oh, out in the car. Yeah, we were sitting in the car, in my Chevrolet car, and I asked her if she liked this diamond ring, and asked her if she knew what the tradition was of what that meant, to give a ring, and we'll set a date, and later on sometime we'll be married.
How did she respond?
How did you respond?
I said yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because she knew, she said she knew before I did that she wanted to get married, so.
So did you then go in the house and tell your mom and dad, or how did that go?
By then, they had gone to bed, and my mother said, "Oh, that's very nice," and turned over and went back to sleep. My dad got dressed and came out of their room and congratulated us both and said he thought he would be a fine young husband.
Wow.
Her mother, I don't think, was necessarily, at the beginning, was really fond of me one way or the other. I didn't impress her.
Why do you think that?
Just like what she did when she was in bed and Linda told her she was going to be engaged. She rolled over and goes back to bed, sleep. Well, her dad was impressed, but her mom wasn't. So that's kind of the way I knew that I wasn't in favor with her mother at the beginning. I don't know.
Did that ever change?
Oh, yeah.
No, not a whole lot. But I knew her dad was on my side. He always, I thought he always cared about me. I wasn't real sure about her mother, ever, really sure.
So,
But I wasn't married to her mother. But I was married to Linda, and that's the main thing.
So tell us about what time of year was this that you proposed?
May.
May?
Mm-hmm.
And then you were married when?
October.
October?
He had to wait till the harvest was done. He was farming for his dad.
Yeah, I see your dad wouldn't let you leave until the harvest was done.
Nope.
And so where did you get married?
You remember?
Salt Lake Temple. We got married during conference time. And it was so crowded in that temple. Oh my goodness. And then it was kind of a double challenge for me because I knew my parents couldn't be with me. We made it.
And how did they respond to that? How did they?
Well, my mother had some issues with that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm the only daughter, and she didn't like that. But hey, they eloped when they got married, so she didn't have a big leg to stand on.
I didn't know they eloped. Your
Yeah.
mom and dad eloped, huh?
Yeah, they did.
Wow.
So
Well,
they didn't have.
Her mother was, we figured we were going to have 2 weddings to please your mother. Civil and go to the temple. She wasn't going for that. Either do one or the other. Okay? So, we did both, I guess.
No, we did the other.
Well, what do you mean the other?
It was one or the other. Either get.
Oh, we did
married
have a
civil or-
reception up at your steakhouse, didn't
And
we?
they
Yeah.
and they were very supportive at the reception and did all the work for us. And we
Yeah,
did
that's
the
right.
Reception in
We
the
didn't have
LDS
to-
building, but parents not being LDS and not being a part of the wedding itself was difficult.
Yes, it was.
Did they, when you were baptized as a little girl, did they see the progression of that road might lead to a wedding where they couldn't go?
I don't think so. I don't think she had any idea.
I don't
what
think so
would-
either.
Would be ahead, but Roe was adamant that he would be married in the temple. That was it, and she said, "Well, why does it have to be his way?" And I said, "Well, it's not just his way. It's what I've been studying about, and I feel like it's God's way." And she came around. She was okay with it. They waited out on the temple grounds while we were being sealed. We went to the temple, like I say, during conference time. So we went in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We didn't get through in there until 10 that night. And it was so crowded, and it was so confusing to 2 young people that didn't know anything that was going on.
Because that was your first time going through the temple.
Oh, yeah, we didn't have any temple, preparation classes.
Yeah.
There was not such a thing.
And did your mom and dad come?
My mom did. I'm trying to think about that. Yeah, my mom was there and my brother was there.
How
And
could-
his
how-
wife.
why wasn't your dad there?
That's a dang good question. I hope we get the chance to ask him. He never bothered to join me in much of anything. It was very important to me.
I can imagine that would have been, so mom was pained because her parents couldn't be there, and you were pained because your dad wouldn't be there.
Yeah. No, not a lot of pain because he never supported me much of anything else in school either. So it didn't surprise me he wasn't there. It really did.
So rather than sadness, probably was it anger or?
No, just kind of disappointed that he didn't make an effort to maybe try, to be there. But he'd made an effort to try to be gone somewhere with the sheep.
Where did you honeymoon?
We went on a big circle up through Idaho, right through this little town we live in now. And Rose said on the trip, "Boy, look at all that water in that river. Wouldn't that be great if it was down in southern Utah? Someday I'd like to live in a place like this." And we ended up here.
Wow. So here's some questions. This is Sheri's question. And the question is, what do you like even more now about your companion than when you first met them? So what do you like more now about your companion than when you first met them?
Well, this is my views, of course. My views of Linda have been around her for X number of years. I totally trust her to be obedient to me. And the vows that we took at the temple, I totally trust her completely. Because she's never done anything to disappoint me. And so I trust her totally. And that is very important to me, to have her as my wife that I can trust to be obedient to what we have learned in the temple, endowments and healings and everything that we learned in the temple, to be obedient to that. And I like that.
And
Feel good about it.
You've been married almost 61 years now?
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit more than 61.
61. Mom, how about you?
The Rose sensitivity. I had no idea he had such a sensitive, kind heart. But as time has gone by and life's experiences have been handed down to us, he's a very sensitive person and very, very caring and loving.
Have there been experiences that have made him more sensitive, or has it been a gentle progression of sensitivity?
I think a gentle perception on my part and progression on his part. He decided he was going to be more an active father with his children than his father was, because Grandpa was always out with the sheep, and when he'd come home he was stay in the bed a long time and not spend much time with the children or enjoying their activities or anything of that nature. And he was always planning what to do to build his business. He wanted to have a big estate so all of his children could stay there and work with him. But that didn't quite work out, but that was his dream. And Roe decided, I'm going to do things with my kids. I don't know how. And I said, you'll learn. And he did. He learned how to play with them when they were little. Remember, you used to lay on the floor and the girls would come running towards you and you'd grab hold of their shoulders and do a flip over you with them and they'd flip over you. And then he learned how to do things like that. And as time went by, that became a lot of good memory in his heart. And we've had a good life.
Do you find that as you've been married, there were lots of pleasant surprises in store for you in the other person, things that maybe you wouldn't have thought about looking for in another person that were pleasant surprises as
Yes.
you went along, realizing the Lord took care of you?
Yes, very much
What were
so.
some of those surprises?
How good Linda was with kids, with children, especially young children. She knew how to be a mother, especially to the younger children. I knew how to get along with them if they were 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, but the little ones I wasn't too good with. I did not know how to deal with small children, but Linda did.
And Mom, where did you learn that? Because you didn't have little kids running around you other than bigger brothers.
She did a lot of babysitting.
I started babysitting my brother's children when I was 9.
Oh.
And I remember one time I was 10 years old. All 3 of them were married and had little ones. I mean, really tiny babies. And they would leave me over the weekend with them to take care of. So I would start Friday night when they'd go off somewhere, and they'd come home Sunday night, and I'd have those responsibility as just a young child to take care of their little ones.
How old were you?
I started when I was 9.
I took advantage of her brothers did.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you had any kids.
There was a period of time when I was about 17. I said, okay, I've had it with taking care of little people. No more babysitting. And
Mom, what did you have any pleasant surprises with Dad?
I had no idea he could work with teenagers so well. But it's a good thing because I was ready to throttle him half the time.
Was there anybody in particular you wanted to throttle? Or all of them at separate times?
No, some are easier for me to work with than others. But,
Everyone of them have their own personality, that's for
yeah,
sure.
and sometimes your personalities work really well together, and sometimes you kind of butt heads. And I had to learn how to not do that. I was on my knees a lot of time when one time I had 5 teenagers in the house at the same time. One was an Indian, one was a cousin, and my own 3 were all teenagers, the oldest 3. And Roe would take me for a ride in the evening, and we'd go out and set up on the bluff in the car. I'd cry for an hour or so, and then, okay, I'm ready to go back at it again.
Well, that takes us to some next questions. David had a few questions. David's first question is, how did it look to have a large family and then have your wife called as the Relief Society president?
You asking me or her?
Well, I guess both of you.
She will. Well, I knew I made some commitments in the temple. I would support her, whatever position she was asked to deal with in the ward. I was still young enough then to remember what I'd raised my hand to in the temple, and I supported her very much. I knew she would do a good job, which she did. Linda didn't have any experience of much, especially in Relief Society, but she did a good job because I heard some of the ladies talk about her being very good at her job in Relief Society.
Yeah, I remember.
So I supported her in that because I was very proud of her for doing things that she had never had any experience with. She did a good job.
Mom, how was it? I'm sorry, Dad. Go ahead.
I was just very pleased with her being accepted of doing something she didn't know much how to do because she had good counselors. She picked good counselors to assist her, older women, and she did a good job of doing that.
Mom, what do you recall from that Relief Society presidency job and having a big family at the same time?
It's a good thing the Lord warned me what was coming because I went down to the hospital before I received my call the first time, and our president was laying in the bed in the hospital. She had had a heart attack, and the Spirit said, "She will be released and you're going to be called." And I left walking back home again, and I'm just shaking my head going, where did that presumptuous idea come? I have no experience with working with the old ladies. What in the world will I do if that's really going to happen? And 2 weeks later, I was called to the bishop's office and asked to take the presidency of the Relief Society. And I didn't know what I was doing. If it hadn't been for Annabelle Otley and Sister Austin and some of the other sisters that worked with me, I'd have been a total failure because I didn't know what I was doing.
Would you call these other sisters mentors or peers to you?
They were mentors. Yeah, they had had a lot of experience, and they were like aunts that I never had been around, or a grandma that I'd never been around, and it was really wonderful working with them.
I was surprised how well they worked with Linda, and especially Mrs. Otley, without bossing her, and being very aggressive to tell her, wait a minute, you're not doing that right or anything. Linda would generally ask her how to do a lot of things, and she didn't tell her unless she was asked. Mm. And I was surprised that some of the women, like Mrs. Otley, was that her personality was such she did not, take over and try to be the Relief Society president herself. She allowed Linda to do her job with some counsel from her.
And I knew my kids were going to be okay because we had our meetings on Sunday to make plans and work with the bishop. And I knew that they would always be fed fried potatoes and corn.
Yeah.
And milk out of a bleach bottle.
Yeah.
Raw milk too.
Raw milk. David has a couple other questions. He said, how did you deal with the ebbs and flows of your marital relationships? So I take it, did your relationship have ebbs and flows?
Still does.
Like everybody does.
How you want to share anything about it, or how you dealt with it, or how you found to be successful with it?
What was not successful was for one of us to get mad and not talk for 3 days. That about destroyed us.
Who did that?
You did.
Oh.
3 days of total silence from the head of the house was really tough. But he learned not to do that because that was just too hard. That was I guess that's an ebb, or it was a really difficult thing. And he quit doing that, and I was sure glad. I would get angry. I had a fierce temper when I was a young girl, about 14 or 15 years old, and was a thrower. I would throw things. I'd slam doors. I had to learn to get that all up. That was just a waste of energy that I didn't, have a lot of extra energy to waste. But, so you just, I think you mostly take your problems to the Lord, and then you try to talk them through. And that's what I tried to do.
How did you, I'm just curious, when you did have those times when Dad, when you wouldn't talk, or Mom, when you got mad and there was that friction in the relationship, how did you come together? Did one of you come and make up, or how did you come back together? How did that look?
Well, I could be gone a lot of my job. I could be gone out of the house, so that was very convenient to just be gone. Linda knew how to apologize.
What would she do?
She would just tell me. Usually just come out and says, I'm sorry for something she may have done, or she usually was the first one to apologize for something, and she still does. That occasionally she's willing to apologize for us having some friction. I'm not that good at doing that, but she is.
How do you apologize?
Did I ever do apologize?
No, I've never, not verbally, but what he'd do was see a need or hear a need of, oh goodness, I'm going to have to put some oil on that hinge on that door, or something like that. And next thing I knew, he had the oil can out and was putting oil in and he did it by physical things he would do around the house.
So Dad would use his actions, service,
Yeah.
to show. David had one more question. He said, how did you find ways to counsel together despite your differences? Did you have differences?
Oh, yes,
Oh,
definitely still do.
Of course. No, we always tried to have prayer in the evening. And it's hard to pray and go before the Lord with your gratitudes and your requests and your needs if you're angry with somebody. So we always, at least I did, try to clean up those things before we had evening prayer. Mm-hmm. And then we tried real hard to have home evenings.
Yeah.
Sometimes they were successful, sometimes they were nightmares, but
Mm-hmm.
but we just kept trying to live the gospel as best we could at the time.
That was the safest thing of all I felt, was trying to live some of the things you would raise your hand to in the temple, of saying you would try to live the gospel, because I had never seen that from my own father in my own home. My mother was the one that kind of made things happen and be livable and be around in my own house. My mom, she was very good at that sort of thing. My dad seemed like he intentionally tried to be gone so much.
So I'd like to follow up on that, Dad, with one of my own questions, and that was, with your father absenting himself from the relationship, did you have mentors? Who taught you how to be a loving father? Where did you learn that? Because you've learned it. You did it. Where did you learn to do that if your father wasn't there to show you?
No. You
I don't know.
Did you watch people in the ward, in the community?
Well, yeah, I usually had people I looked up to very much in the ward.
Like,
But I'm trying to think of somebody specific. Who would that be? I'd have to think about some of that. But I did have some bishops I've had that I respected very much. Different bishops would, I know they would counsel and tell you how to have a little more peace and harmony at your home. And some of them you totally trusted, some bishops, but others not so much. Bishops always have their own personality too. And some of them some of you get really well acquainted with, and some of them you trust and emulate, and some of them you just trust them to be your bishop. And some of them are very, very good counselors.
So is there a bishop in your past that you're looking forward to seeing on the other side, and telling them how grateful you are for their example for you?
Stand smooth and
like Brother Wolstenhume. Remember the Wolstenhume guy?
Brother Morgan.
Yeah, Lee Morgan. He wasn't my bishop, but he was a bishop out in the country.
He was a few years older than you, wasn't he?
He's over in the rest home now, over in Rupert. I go see him occasionally. He's over there at the hospital in the rest home at Rupert Hospital.
Would you consider him a mentor?
Kind of, in some ways. And but Brother Wilson, he was one of our first bishops, wasn't he, Linda, when we moved here?
Brother who?
Wilson Hume. Wilson Hume, yeah.
Wilson Hume.
Wilson Hume. But he was just a good human being. And I trusted him totally. If I needed some counsel or anything, I trusted him totally to give me some good advice.
And Mom, you mentioned Stan Smoot.
Stan Smoot.
I trusted him too. I knew him very well.
He was my bishop, and he counseled with us before we were married. And gave us a little bit of, not really a preview of what we were going into, but how to make a marriage work and different things like that. He was really sweet.
You probably knew him, didn't you?
Yeah, my brother married his oldest daughter.
Yeah.
But did you know him very well yourself, the person?
He served in the stake presidency with my father.
Okay.
So yeah,
he was. He counseled me about Linda before we was married.
Do you remember any of the counsel he gave you?
He said, when you go to the temple, you are going to be getting some covenants and stuff in the temple you are going to be very surprised with. And I hope when you go there, you'll be able to keep those covenants because they will be safety for you.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, I trusted him. I was only met him once, I think. Well, I knew who he was sitting on the stand, but when we were counseled with him, before we went to the temple, he counseled with us, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been good.
That's the only counsel I had. I didn't have any counsel for my own bishop. In Orderville, we didn't have anything.
So what I'm learning is when you didn't have family members to teach you, your ward became a good set of advisors and mentors and also other people in your community.
Yeah.
How important it was that ward brought different age people so you could have mentors and peers.
Mm-hmm.
So
one of the very best places and things we learned from our ward, their branch, in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
We're 10,000 miles away from anybody back in the United States, but we had our branch. And members of our branch, especially our branch president, became number one to us. They were very important in our life, weren't they?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Extremely important because we had no family. Our branch was our family.
And was this a military branch? Or?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So there were other Americans?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And an interest in the branch, you knew they weren't going to be there long. In the military, you come, you know they're going to be released, go back home. So you ain't going to be there long. They're not going to be there for 10 years. Going to be there for 2 or 3, and that's it. Even your branch president's going to be there short. So you get acquainted with them in a different way.
Yeah.
How is it different?
They trained us to how to evacuate if we ever had a problem in the country of Germany and had to get out. And you go down the Autobahn this way, and I said I had to laugh because we didn't have a car, we had a buggy. I could just see me pushing Anita in the buggy heading down the Autobahn. Mm-hmm. And the branch president's wife turned to me and said, "Don't worry, Linda." She said, "I will come and get you."
I trusted him to know, James, I think he was from New Jersey or somewhere, that she would be taken care of if I had to be somewhere else.
Yep.
And that was a very possibility. I could be gone somewhere on assignment and she'd have to go home.
Yeah.
Well, and didn't that happen during the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yes.
What do you remember happening during the Cuban Missile Crisis from a military perspective?
I remember we had a big alert, and Kennedy and the Russian Khrushchev had a little face-to-face with each other. And Kennedy says, "You will not bring those missiles into Cuba."
So what happened, or what could have happened from a military
I haven't a clue, but I was on call. I had to leave. Linda and I got to live off base, which was kind of interesting since I didn't have a rank of very high rank. They allowed me to live off base. I had to go live back on base for several weeks. When that crisis took place, I had to go live off back in base. So that's, if I had to even go somewhere else in the country, I would have to gone. They had to call me to be somewhere else in Germany or somewhere else in Europe. I had to go. And she would have been on her own. And my branch president said, we'll take care of her.
What was the longest time you folks were apart from each other after being married?
7 months.
How long had you been married at that time?
2.5 months.
So you were married in May. No.
In October.
In October. So.
The end of November, he was gone.
And you were now pregnant with a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't there when you gave birth to your little girl. Mm-hmm. And then after the 7 months, you ponied it up and got on an airplane and went to introduce your dog.
Well, actually, he came back. You have to have 8 weeks of training before they send you away. So he left in the end of November, but he went to Colorado Springs, and I followed him. So.
Well, you didn't go the first time with me.
No, I didn't. You went for the first 4 weeks.
On my own.
On your own, and I bounced around, lived with here and there and everywhere, and then with his mothers and father and my mother and father and my brothers, a different brother, Myron. I stayed in his home for quite a while. And then he came home for Christmas, and then I went back with him for the second 4 weeks. So then he left in February.
And I didn't get to live off base. I had to live off base, and you lived at a home in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, so he'd come home nights, though. I had him in the evenings.
So when you left, did you know you obviously knew your wife was pregnant?
No, he didn't know until
Nope.
He came back and we went in, and I said, I think we might go and get a little baby here. And sure enough, we were.
So when you left the second time, how did you feel leaving a wife pregnant?
The second time I went with him.
Oh, to Colorado Springs.
Yeah, she lived in Colorado Springs.
For the month, the 2 months. Was it 2 months or 1 month? I can't remember.
Well, I was 8 weeks.
8 weeks.
And second 8 weeks.
Oh, it was
in the
so
military.
it was 8 weeks each time. Okay.
And then it was from there you then went to Germany?
And I went back to home again.
Didn't have a clue where I was going to be called to, and I was called overseas.
So, but it was still mom pregnant with a baby going one way, and you're going the other way. How did that feel?
Terrible.
Felt like I was in the military. My life was not mine. Whatever the military was going to have me do, I was married to the military.
Mom, how did you feel about it?
You know, it was lonely.
Why?
Because my support was gone.
She made more money than I did, though. being my spouse, I look at my voucher when I get paid. She got more money than I did being my spouse. I got paid about $100. She got about $150 or something.
$125, but it was after Anita was born that I got the extra.
How did you get home to Centerville?
Rose's mother flew out to Colorado, and she helped drive me back in our car.
Jeez.
Wow. This is a very thoughtful question. This is from Melissa. So Melissa is in nursing school in Rockford, Illinois. She said, I'd like to know more about Grandpa's depression and how he fought to stay here. I think his story is inspiring. Also, depression is hereditary, and it's important for him to understand that his story matters. It carries power and will help his grandkids further navigate this life when they have episodes of depression. Dad, you want to tell us, you feel comfortable sharing any of that?
How did she know about it? Did her mother tell her?
I would imagine, yeah.
It's part of our family history.
Well, it's something that nobody else has to go through, but if they go through it, they're going to have to go through it and solve it their own way. They're going to have to figure out how to get through it.
What was your way? How did you solve it or deal with it?
Depression. I had never had feelings like that before in my life, of feeling totally lost and could not solve problems myself.
Mm-hmm.
I had to trust somebody else to figure out what to do. And I said, my God, aren't you smart enough to figure your own problems out your own self? I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I had to finally decide I had to have professional help. Somebody I totally trusted to give me advice how to solve this and how to deal with it and how to live with it professionally. I would recommend professional help.
Was it a hard decision to make, to decide to get professional help?
Yes.
Why?
Figured I'd do it myself. I'd always made my own decision before that. Why can't I still do it myself? I couldn't. I finally figured out I could not figure things out in my own head. Mm-hmm. Somebody had to help me, because even my own bishop would suggest the same thing. Because I'm not a psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest you get professional help and somebody you trust.
What
trust is the main thing.
What role did Mom play in that?
She supported me 100%. You're going to have to answer on this question.
Well,
because she was the one dealing with more of the problems than I was, because I didn't hardly know what I was doing.
yeah. And he was not in a position, because he had all these physical things going on. He had the lack of balance with the chemicals within his own body. He lost 40 pounds in a month. He was just a very sick human being. So I called my doctor, and he said, bring him in and we'll see what's going on. And he said we'd better put him in a hospital. So we did. Roe had blessings. He had done everything he could think of to get through this. And he was right. It was time for a professional. So I called I called my sister-in-law in Salt Lake, and I said, I need an appointment with the best psychiatrist there is in Salt Lake for Roe. He is sick and he needs to come down. And she said, I'll get back with you as quick as I can. And she said, I've got one. She called me back and said, I've got somebody lined up. Can you be here tomorrow? And I said, we'll be there tomorrow. So in the morning I went into the hospital, and Roe had shut his hospital room door, which is a sick person like that. You shouldn't do that. They're not supposed to isolate themselves, but he had. And my state president had been there to see him and said, he's really not well. And I said, I know, we're going to Salt Lake. After all these years, seeing someone you love so much in so much pain is hard to talk about.
Yeah.
I didn't think I'd break down on this, but you can't dwell on stuff like this, because it gets worse if you dwell on it.
Sure.
But the doctor said, I'll give him a shot and he'll sleep all the way down. Well, he woke up at Tremont, and he had no idea where he was. The bishop was driving my car, and a brother from the ward was coming down with his car to bring the bishop home. And so off we went. Now, I don't know who had the kids. I have no idea who took care of my children, but somebody in the ward did.
This was 1989, wasn't it?
Yep.
I don't know.
I think we were in Louisiana when we got the call. Was there, if you don't mind me asking, were there symptoms that that stepped up to alert you that something wasn't right? What precipitated this? Do you know?
I got to the point where I trusted Linda was going to take care of me, because I couldn't take care of myself. I really couldn't. Mentally, I didn't know what the heck was going on, and I trusted Linda to do whatever was the right thing to do with me.
Mom, did it come on all of a sudden, or was it a gradual
No,
thing?
it was an all of a sudden thing. It happened when the government destroyed half his business. And he spent 20 years building it up. And overnight there was a buyout and half of his customers disappeared. And he thought, if I can just work harder and faster, I can get it all back. And that was impossible. So he wanted to start running, and he was literally pacing and running and trying to put his business back together. And like I said, I didn't know who was taking care of the kids. Well, most of them were gone. I don't have a clue where David went. He must have stayed with somebody, because he didn't go to Salt Lake with us. I stayed with my mother and dad's home. But in 4 or 5 days, first thing they did was give him medication to make him sleep. And he slept. He hadn't slept for night after night. He would be awake. And then they started doing blood tests and finding out, boy, his blood is all out of whack. He doesn't have all these different minerals, and if you don't have some of them, you do get goofy. But about 4 or 5 days later, he was almost totally back to himself. But then they said, okay, we're going to do group therapy. You work with the psychiatrist, Dr. Fisher. We'll stay on these 3 medications you're taking right now. It's doing good. And if he wanted, he could go home now. And Rose said, no, I'm not ready. And so he stayed a full 10 days in the hospital in Salt Lake.
Veterans Hospital, wasn't it?
No, it was just a
Oh, he was a
hospital.
vet.
He was a vet,
yeah.
yeah.
That's right.
And he went to work in a veteran hospital
Yeah.
after he left private practice. But he was the perfect person to work with Roe, and Roe was calm and collected and fragile when we came home again. But he said, I'm just going to take care of what I've got. And he says, I don't know how we're going to make house payments. And so I got a job, and we made house payments, $200 a month. It was a real stretch. It was a good thing we were established, and the house was pretty much paid for, but it wasn't totally paid off. But we said, I'm working I worked in Rupert for a while, and I said, you're going to be okay. We're going to be all right. And I just kept trying to reassure him that things were going to be okay. We'll just live it one day at a time, and that's what we did. And he got his strength back. And the more he worked and found peace and contentment in his work, the quicker he healed.
So what I'm hearing is there was a professional challenge that just turned your world upside down, and that threatened your purpose, who you were, and your ability to care for your family.
Sure did, financially.
And that's really a man's role.
That's very important. It was very important to me to do that.
I know one of the important parts of her question was, what helped you maintain the desire to stay here? I would imagine there are dark moments when the thought of carrying on had little appeal, and you have to will yourself to want to wake up the next morning. Is that accurate?
I don't understand your question, I guess.
Well, I guess her question is, let me just make certain I'm reading it properly. I'd like to know more how you fought to stay here.
Oh, you mean right here in...
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
So, where else is there to go?
Well, I mean...
This is my life. Right here was my life of making a living to provide for my family. Where else am I going?
She doesn't say exactly, but I'm wondering if Melissa's thinking, if you ever had dark thoughts of taking your own life.
Heaven, no.
Okay.
That never entered my brain. If I even tried that, I'd foul that up, and I'd be wounded. The rest of my life, I'd be wounded was a
Yeah.
cripple because I couldn't do it properly.
I know a lot of people do it when they're as ill as he was, attempt to take their life, and sometimes successfully do, but he never had the desire, and we're so grateful for that. His was so much more the physical end, and that is the part that's genetic. It was the physical end of things. His body was turning on him, and he never did think about taking his own life, and never has, and I'm so grateful that wasn't part of his problem. It was never. It was wonderful.
I'd like to add one thing. When we came back from Salt Lake to Burley, the doctor down there, he said, "You can't come and see me anymore because I'm going to go to the Veterans Hospital." Well, I could have won if I'd wanted to, I guess, go to the Veterans Hospital. But he says, "I would suggest you find somebody in Twin Falls or Burley or somewhere to be your physician, your psychiatrist." And I did know one in Twin Falls, a guy. How I knew his name, I don't remember. Why did I know him?
I don't know how you got acquainted.
Anyway, I knew him, and I went and visited him several times in Twin Falls. I asked him one time after I'd been there a few times to visit him, "I'd like to quit taking some of these medications I'm taking for depression. How am I going to know when I can quit taking some of these?" He says, "Well, I know you trust me to counsel you and advise you on medications. I trust you one thing, you'll know. You'll know up here when you can quit taking a few of them. I was taking about 3 or 4. You will know when to quit taking X, Y, and Z. You'll know." Says, "I don't even trust myself. Why I think I'm talking to the psychiatrist in the first place."
Mm-hmm.
You'll know upstairs. You'll know up here. And I did. It was an amazing thing. I knew when to quit taking the medications, and it worked.
And some people never get to quit. They have to stay on it. But in his case, he gradually weaned himself off of all of it. And
Yeah.
been basically fine.
Some of those medications were lifesavers. I could tell they were working in my brain up here, and I didn't. I probably could have taken the rest of my life if I felt that good.
Wow.
But I knew I had to. I did not want to depend on, it's like alcohol or cigarettes or something. I didn't want to depend on those. I wanted to feel right and being able to make decisions on my own without a drug of some kind to help me decide.
Yeah.
But you had 2 problems, anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And so when some of the medicine was for anxiety and some of it was to help put a floor under the depression so you don't go down any further. And little by little he knew which one he should get off of. And I think it was the Spirit helping him.
I was going to say, to be that self-aware is very difficult. The last question I have comes from Tyler in Wisconsin. He says, "I have heard a lot about Grandma's dad, Victor Claudius Adams, but I know almost nothing about her mom, Vilma Viola Delp Adams. Could you ask her for a few thoughts on her mom?"
Did he ever meet your mom?
I don't think so.
That's interesting.
Mom and I were the only 2 females in the house. So we were close in our own way. But I noticed in some of the pictures of her, she was kind of one to step to the side and observe life a lot. We've got pictures of her with her family as a girl, and she would be sitting about 3 feet away from them looking at them. And I thought she taught a lot of things without knowing she was teaching them. But she was an observer, a very intelligent woman who loved to read, and then she'd share what she had learned. She loved to talk. She had a powerful voice. I think she might have had a little hearing problem because she talked quite loud. And she made herself heard and made herself known, and she was very supportive. One time I was showing a horse in Twin and had an accident with the horse. The pony got caught in the fence and flipped over in the cart, but I could hear my mother's voice saying, "You're going to be okay, Linda. Get back up there. You can do this." So she was really very supportive of me. When I was baptized, Mom was with me. And she said that was something I wanted to do, and she was right there with me the whole time. So I always felt supported by her. She might have had her issues, I don't know. But I learned my love of reading from her. One time when I was really angry with one of my brothers and broke a bunch of plates on his head, she said, "Linda, you have a really bad temper, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, I do. I don't like being tormented." And she said, "I was the same way." And my dad said to me one day, "Velma, you have a temper." He said, "So did I." So my grandfather had the temper, my mother had the temper, and I had it. But Mom said, "My dad told me, Linda, Velma, you will outgrow it." I did, and you will too. And so she said, "I'll give you the same advice. You will outgrow it." And I did. I felt like I outgrew it.
That's great.
I'm sure I had flare-ups, but
that's great
yeah,
advice.
She was a very knowledgeable lady and shared her knowledge and was very supportive of me.
She was very intelligent. She was, for a fact.
And
For the amount of education she had, she was a good reader, and she read a lot.
And she remembered it all.
And, she was very, very intelligent. But I don't think I ever got on her right side. Well, I was on the side.
Oh, I think you did.
Her dad, her husband, accepted me, and I knew that.
Yeah.
Her mom, I wasn't sure, ever really quite sure, if she thought I was a good son-in-law.
Well, let me ask you one more question. What is the most valuable physical possession you own? Your most valuable physical possession. And each of you gets your own answer.
I get to be first, okay?
What about if we have the same thing? I can't have the same thing?
No, you can't. You can't say same as her. That doesn't work.
Oh.
We'll let you do that.
I think my home. Knowing I have a place where our roots are deep, and we want to stay put as long as we can, and when we can't, we'll of course leave it. But I think it's a place of safety. Rose made it that way. He's provided so well for us over the years, and I know I have little trinkets and things that, you know, like a costume that I wore when I was showing horses, the clothes I was baptized in, they're valuable. The little locket my dad gave me, or the little pendulum that he gave me, those are treasures. But the most valuable of all is the home and the family that we have.
Thank you, Mom. Dad, how about you?
Possession. Can your wife be your possession?
Well, it has to be something other than your spouse, because that's the easy answer.
What about your children?
Can't be the children.
They're not possessions?
Physical, non-animate object.
The truck and the dog.
Yeah, my dog. Yeah, that's my dog.
If this house started to catch on fire and you had to grab, assuming that physical possession is in the house, what's the one physical thing you're going to want to get, assuming Linda's or Mom's taken care of, and your dogs? What's the next physical
I've got a steel thing in my bedroom in there with all important papers for my life. I probably want to grab that thing. It's got all my, a patriarchal blessing in there. It's got my birth certificate in there. Got Social Security, Social Security papers. We've even got papers in there, dialogue that Linda's your wife's going to have to read to my funeral.
Oh. We've already got
dialogue written out for my funeral, yeah.
I didn't know you had that in there.
That's good to have.
I think Anita wrote her out, at least for one of my songs. I think a song for my funeral.
So the metal box with your papers.
Yeah, it's in my room, in my bedroom.
How about, I was wondering, how about your pictures here that Stan put together?
Oh man, we love that.
I would think that those would probably be right on your high end list.
Yeah, they are. They're all right here.
Right over there, and
Did you want to look at any of those pictures?
Yeah. What pictures do you want to show me?
Which one do you want to look at, Linda?
We'll start with the ones in the snow.
So
I went to Roe's home 3 times the first year that we were acquainted, and we stopped on the way over Cedar Mountain, and there was a snowdrift there, and he had me sit on the snowdrift.
is this dating pictures or?
Yeah.
These were dating
Those
pictures.
to go to school in Cedar City from my hometown at Waterville, if I went and the roads were clear, which sometimes they weren't, because you could see that roads could be closed sometimes. That's Highway 14 up over the mountain. To Cedar City was maybe 50 miles.
Mm-hmm.
So
Now-
what'd you do? Just get your phone out and take a picture, or
Phone, I have no such a thing as a phone.
you had a camera though?
Yeah, I think I've still got it out in my garage. An
Wow.
old camera.
And
And I used to take a lot of pictures, but I just don't take no pictures no more.
now this picture of somebody's on a tractor.
That's the caterpillar.
Oh, that's probably
One
Linda.
of the time we went over the mountain through the snow, and when we got up there, Rose said, "Would you like to drive a caterpillar?" I said, "Sure." They had one. They made tanks out in the desert to hold water for the sheep, and so he let me drive it a little bit.
They built reservoirs.
You actually drove it.
I did, a little bit.
Oh man, my mom's in the Army and you're driving caterpillars. And tell us about this beautiful picture.
Well,
of,
then we transferred up to Utah State and I did a semester up there, and they had a homecoming dance, and so Roe and I dressed up, and that was the costumes we wore to the dance up at Utah State.
Mom and Dad, thank you. This is a wonderful visit. This is going to be very precious for everybody.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else you want to say, Dad?
Yes. Why does Melissa want to know about depression? Does she have to deal with it occasionally? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know.
She said it's hereditary in the family, so.
I think being hereditary in the family, and her being a nurse, and she just has a very kind heart, and I think she just wants to know. And
Yeah.
I wonder if she wants to know for her own information or for information for a profession she's going to be involved in.
Well, Melissa will be getting a copy of this tape. Melissa, be listening and feel free to reach out. But I'm glad she asked the question, and thank you for being willing to share it. That says a lot. That means a lot to
Well,
us.
I hope you edit out some of the some of the breaking down part.
Well,
Do you have to deal with it yourself, Kevin?
I never deal with depression.
Do you have some
Was that look, Anita?
Do you have alcohol at your house to deal with it, or what do you do, Kevin?
I think that would have been easier, but no, Dad. I think from I don't know how much they can hear me, but this last change with COVID affecting my business, I can identify where you came from.
I can see, yes, that would be it.
And-
Nothing to do with you, with something else. It's putting you in the poorhouse almost.
Well, when you're a sole proprietor, entrepreneur, you own
Yes.
your own business, you are it.
I know. Yeah.
And when things change and you can't go out and earn money, it's not just you're not earning money. You're no longer worthwhile as a person.
That's
or
right.
as a human being.
No, I agree
It's
with
not a true thing, but that's the way you feel.
you. Well, that's the way men sometimes
I
internalize it.
understand that,
Yeah.
but it's not true. You are still valued.
But you can say that all you want, but sometimes you just don't feel it.
You don't feel
I know what you're talking about, exactly.
your rug's been pulled out from under you, and you're falling.
So I've been very fortunate to have a wife that's been very patient, and these last few months, having her stay down here has been tough, but it's really helped me to force me to go in a different direction professionally.
Yeah.
And so, and we have depression in my family too. and so I have to keep my stuff in balance. And
Yeah.
so I look at what you went through, and I have all the love and respect for you. I'm so grateful of what you've been through, but I'm also grateful that you're willing to talk about it, and you're self-aware enough that you can help teach the rest of us. So that when the blessing you gave me a few months ago was so necessary, so needed by me. So, because I knew it was coming from a spot of a dungeon that you've lived in.
Dungeon is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
You don't feel like you can escape.
Yep.
You're stuck.
And I think that, a lot of people, especially these young kids, they get so excited, they get married, and you're happy for them, but you just don't want to say, it's going to get really hard, so hard, you have no idea. But you want them to just, when they hit those tough spots, lean on the Lord, lean on each other, and hold tight.
Hopefully.
Tie a knot in that rope that you're at the end of and hang on, because it's going to be a rough ride.
All right, chicken family.
Ooh, I'm hungry.
Anything else you two want to say? Dad, was there something?
Well, from my experience of being with Linda and my experience of being overseas by myself for long periods of time, the church and branch presidents is your lifeline. You can't hang on to friends generally that you make, to stabilize you for what you need from this guy upstairs. Friends will be good friends to you, and you need friends, but not quite like you need the church and its covenants that's made to make it stable and make it so you know you can survive.
When you know you've held your hand up in the temple to make covenants, and those other people next to you have done that same thing, you know that you can call on them and that they get it.
Yeah.
Well, I thought when Linda and I worked in the temple, these are the kind of people I want to be with. It must be like the celestial kingdom of working in the temple, and that would be the people you work with in the temple.
We just had that discussion today.
Those people are ideal. Not all of them. They're all got personalities. You're better friends to some of them than others. But generally, the feelings you have with those people is what I want.
Yep.
That kind of feeling with those people in that place has got to be Heavenly Father's celestial kingdom.
I agree. Okay.
Well said. Come and eat.
Thank you.
Good.